Hello, everyone. I am Liina Toomse, a librarian at the Tallinn Central Library, and I welcome you to Tallinn Central Library's annual Young Adult Literature Day. We are joined by one of the top young adult authors in Estonia, Sepp. You are welcome to ask questions. Please write them in the YouTube comment section, and we will ask them from the author at the end of our talk. Without further ado, I present to you Sepp.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm very happy that it can happen over the internet, because although the Young Adult Literature Day happens in Estonia, I am actually currently in Colorado. So thanks to the wonderful internet that allows us to connect no matter where we are. So I will just give a quick overview about how my life is as a writer, how it started, how it's going, all of that. And yeah, if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask them. I'm always really happy to answer to any kind of the questions. And yeah, I will trust Liina and Mari-Liisa that they can have a look when there are questions asked, because when I'm in the share mode, I unfortunately cannot see them myself. But here I go. So for me, it's always interesting where it all started. I was actually born in Rapla, just in the middle of Estonia, in a very tiny town. And from there, it kind of all went. I have lived abroad a little bit. First time I moved abroad was when I moved to Germany. I came back to Estonia to go to university. And although I'm a writer, I'm actually also a social worker by trade. So I studied in Tallinn University, and I graduated with social work bachelor degree. They also, at some point, I ended up living in Austria, where you have the most beautiful mountains. Then I went to New Zealand, and right now I'm actually living in United States, in Colorado, more specifically in the Rocky Mountains area in Breckenridge. And I love it here because we have the mountains here that unfortunately we are missing in Estonia. But no worries, soon, more specifically next week, I'm going to be moving back to Estonia. So it's going to be another interesting period in my life that hopefully will also motivate me to write a lot more. And that will also make it possible to meet you in real life. But on to my books. So my very first book, Medallion, or Medallion, if translated, started very randomly. So I was in 7th grade, I was 14 years old, and my best friend at this point decided to write the story, just a random story, because why not? And for some reason I decided that, oh, if she writes a story, I also want to give it a try and write it and see what happens. And I remember I started writing the book in the physics class in the middle of it, and most of that book was actually written in various classes that I liked the least, like chemistry, physics, Russian, math, all of that. Also, since I was writing it mainly during the class time, I really couldn't, I can't just bring my laptop with me and plop it in the middle of the table and assume that teachers won't mind it. So instead I wrote it in several notebooks, very thin ones that I could hide underneath my underneath all of the books and stuff that I'm actually supposed to do in the class. I still have them. Unfortunately, they're not here with me. They're still in Estonia. They're now more than 10 years old with a lot of handling. So they're kind of about to fall apart, but they're very interesting to look at. So yeah, I spent about 2 years working on my first book. At this point, I didn't even realize or know that, hey, that might end up being a book. It was just a story I was writing because I enjoyed it, and people who got to read it, they wanted me to keep on writing the story so they would know what happens. How it actually ended up turning into a book was thanks to internet again. I was a member in one of internet forums, and I also posted the story there. And one of them recommended to me that, hey, there's gonna be a YA competition, basically, that you should maybe try to send that book in. So I did. I typed it all again into the computer, checked it for all of the mistakes, and I sent it into the competition. To be honest, I expected absolutely nothing. It was just like, I'll send it in, I'll see what happens. And to my big surprise, I ended up getting a third place. And that also meant they actually wanted to publish my story that I wrote during 7th, 8th, 9th grade. So it made me obviously very happy, but even at this time, I still didn't consider myself an author. It was just something that, hey, I wrote the book, everyone can do it, right? And who hasn't read that book yet? So it's kind of a story where the main character has to deal with issues with her mom, meeting new friends that might not always seem the best friends, especially considering or according to her parents. And it's honestly I like to read that book. If I would write it now, it would be a whole different story than what I wrote it back then. But I still love to read it. And I love that there is a book like that, because that's kind of where it all started. And also in 2019, there was a second print of the same story. So everything is the same inside the book. It was just I needed to get another print out because the first print was sold out. You could not get it anywhere anymore. And I had a lot of people who kept writing to me and were like, hey, can I buy it somewhere or not? So now I have the same book, twice print. So that's another huge step for sure. The books that came after that, so Minevikute mälestused, that's Memories Without the Past. That one kind of, I started to write it when I was on a trip, on a ski trip, and I wanted some book that goes fast. So in that book, the main character goes on a hitchhiking trip. She kind of runs away from home for the summer and hitchhikes around Estonia. So it includes all of the different stories of what happens to her, who she meets, some good people, some bad people, while also trying to work out through the reasons that she ran away from home and hopefully returning home at the end of the summer. The second part of this book, Minevik olevikus, the past in the present, I started to write because I went to university. And quite soon, some of my mates in university, they found out that I have written a couple of books and they have actually read those books. And so they asked, what's going to happen with the girl, with the main character in Minevikute mälestused? What's her life story after she got back home? It kind of got me thinking, and I ended up starting a second part for that book. I can't remember what conference I was in. I was definitely in some kind of a conference where I was supposed to, listen and pay attention. And instead of that, I started to write the new book. And that's actually been kind of one of my habits. When I need to do something else, it's always the best time to start writing. Minevik olevikus comes back to the same main character, but her life has moved on by 5 years. And suddenly everything she did 5 years ago and people she met 5 years ago when she had run away from home and when she was hitchhiking, they start to show up in her life again. And it kind of messes up her life a little bit. So again, she has to make some choices and see what she wants to do with her life and which way she wants to go. Interestingly enough, I have always wanted to write a third book in the series, but I have some ideas. I'm still waiting for the proper idea, but there might also come a third book with the same main character. And one of the reasons why I really want to do it is because in both of those books, the titles inside the book, they are just not random titles, but they are actually like quotes and sayings and stuff like that. And I just want to write another book where I can use quotes and sayings as the titles. From there on, I also wrote my currently first and only book that was meant for adults, Väike roosa pilet paradiisi, Tiny Pink Ticket to the Paradise. It doesn't mean that young adults can't read it. Of course they can, but it was that book I sent into the competition for adult novels. So it's also marketed accordingly. And this one started very easily. So my guess is that most of us have always dreamed of what we would do if we would win a lot of money. I don't speak about like 100 euros or 1,000 euros. I mean, what would we do if we would win like 30 million euros? That's definitely an amount of money that can change your life, your family's life, if you have your kids' lives and all of that. So I wanted to write a story about how it goes and what happens with that. But obviously, if you just write about the lottery win, it's I don't know, it's not going to be that great of a book because not much happens. So for my main character in that book, I actually ended up making it a little bit harder for her. And she's also in an abusive relationship. Her parents, they adore her boyfriend, but she's actually still stuck. And you would think that money helps to solve all of the problems, or at least most of them. But for her, the fact that she wins 30 million euros, it doesn't magically make her life better. There's still a lot that she has to go through. And there's a lot of things that she has to learn and unlearn. The main reason why I did really enjoy writing that book was also because I got to dream again what it would be to win 30 million euros and what would I do with that money, donations, changing your life, all of that. After that book, I really haven't had any other ideas to write for adults specifically. So I've stuck with the young adult books that are again meant for everyone who want to read them. It's just kind of an interesting path where I am right now. Okay, the book after that came, I'm sorry, but what the? I kind of started that book after thinking what stories I haven't seen in Estonian yet, and especially written by Estonians. And I realized that we are missing one book that might really fit in. So Vabandust, aga mis asja is a story about a 13-year-old Jane, whose parents are divorced. So it's not a big issue because a lot of people decide at one point or other that the person they've shared their life with until now, that maybe they don't want to share their life with anymore. So they get divorced. Her parents get along absolutely amazingly. She lives with her dad, so she would have been able to stay in the same town where she grew up. She still sees her mom a lot. Everything is nice and dandy. And then her mom has news. So her mom has found herself a new partner and she wants to introduce her new partner to her daughter. Everything is still great until it comes out that mom's new partner is actually a woman. So Jane's mom comes out of the closet. And it's rather a big surprise to the main character. And on top of that, just dealing with her own emotions in regards to that unexpected news. It also makes its way to her school, and people are different. So she has to deal with her friends struggling with the news, her classmates, schoolmates bullying her over it, and also from the teachers. So it's a little bit of a mess where she has to try to find a way out to basically get her life back to as normal as possible. The next book I wrote was kind of the same story, that what are we missing in Estonian young adult bookshelves, basically. Jagatud suvi or shared summer is a book that's 100% mainly meant for people who love horses and who have been or who love riding with horses and stables and all of that. I remember when I was still a teenager, I used to go to a stable like 5 to 6 times a week, and I would have loved to read stories about it as well. But for some reason, there just really weren't any. There were like Black Beauty, the classic, and then a couple of children's books with ponies and stuff, but really nothing too much with where teenagers and young adults would where the book about them would also include horses and riding. So I decided to, hey, I'll give it a try. I'll see what happens. And I actually, for that book, I used some stories from my own life, from my own experience. So when I was a teenager and I went to that stable, there was 2 weeks that we had another girl come into the stable and I had to share my horse with her. So because she didn't bring her own, and I was riding with the horse that belonged to the stable. And just because we suddenly had to share that horse, I was so angry and so pissed off. I absolutely hated her, and I definitely showed it. I still remember one of the things I did. So because in stables, you also have some, rats and mice that you need to take care of. So we had some rat poison out that would mummify the rats. And I would put the mummified rats in her boots. So she would definitely know that I don't like her. Funnily enough, we ended up in the same high school. We ended up actually getting along really well, becoming friends. And she even proofread that book for me. And it was just really great. But that was one of the first cases where I really took something from my life to make it into a story. Taevad tyhjad tribüünid, or The Empty Bleachers in the Sky, is probably still one of my favorite books that I've written. That book started with a title. I saw a photo on the internet. Oh, I don't even remember how long time ago, but I saw a photo and it was like, oh, those 3 words, Taevad tyhjad tribüünid, came to my mind. And I just knew that I need to have a book with a title, Taevad tyhjad tribüünid. At this point, I did not know what I'm going to write in the book, how long it's going to be, what it's going to be, but I knew that I want to have a book with that title. It took 2 tries to actually write that book. The first version that I wrote, I was so happy when it was done. I sent it into the young adult novel competition again, and I got nothing from there, not even just a recognition, definitely no award. And I was so disappointed. I was convinced that they don't know what a good story is, blah, blah, blah. And I just kind of hid that book and the draft far, far away in my laptop memory. But since I still wanted to have a book with that title, at one point several years later, I took it out, I reread it, and I was so happy they didn't publish it, because to be honest, the first draft was complete crap. To rework it, I deleted from about 50,000 words, I deleted more than 35,000. I redid kind of the whole setup of what's going to happen, rewrote it. It was really, really difficult emotionally to delete that much of the story that you have and then try to rewrite it. But I sent it back into the competition, and this time it was recognized and it got published. And to be honest, the version that got published is so much better than the first draft. If someone really wants, I still have the first draft in my laptop. I'm happy to share it so you can compare 2 stories and you can see how it can change. And it was a great lesson for me that sometimes what you really need is just to rewrite your story until it gets better. Oh yeah, here is the photo that I found. So yeah, that was the photo that I saw that gave me the title and therefore also gave me the book. Continuing on with horses, I wrote the second part as well, Tagasi sadulasse, Back to the Saddle, where the main character at this time has to deal with a really rough injury. injury that she got when she was riding her horse and when she had a really bad fall, and kind of stuff that can come with really bad accidents where you end up getting trauma, where you might end up getting anxiety, all of that. And it's just really hard for her to deal with the fact that the hobby that's been basically the center of her universe for years is now something that makes her absolutely terrified. And since her friends are also through that hobby and they all are in the stable, she basically also loses her friends in some way because she doesn't really know how to voice what's going on in her mind. So it's a little bit of a struggle of how it's possible to get through or to work through a very bad accident that doesn't affect you only physically, but also mentally. Lumelinnusurm, Snowbird's Death, is another book that came to me first with the title. I remember when I was in New Zealand, I was actually walking to work, and I think I was reading Eesti Express, the newspaper, and somewhere came those two words. And again, it was something that I need to have a book with that title. I don't know yet what it's going to talk about, but I need to have that title. And soon enough, I luckily also found the story. So again, years ago, I was a very active member in one of the forums, a different forum that I mentioned before. And I ended up getting to know one girl there, one user who was having rather rough time in her life. We got really worried about her, and we tried to support her the best we could. And basically, I don't want to spoil too much of the story, but I used her story in that book. I got permission from her and everything like that, but I was able to bring that story that I also wanted to tell for many years. I was able to join it in with the title that was Waiting. And that's also one of my favorite books that I've written because it's just really, really close to me. And with it having roots in real life, has a little bit different vibe to that. Kind of the story that you can expect from there is main characters' best friends, both of them. They move away basically at the same time. And it kind of causes some difficulties with their interactions, because if you move away, it's very easy to get really kind of sucked into your new life, your new friends. So it's very easy to forget your old friends. But she feels kind of left behind, and she struggles with it. And interestingly enough, she's going to find the most support from online. So it also brings up some questions about are online friends real friends? Can you call someone a friend who you haven't seen in real life, but you only talk to them through messages in internet? It's kind of that whole topic, but I'm quite happy with how the book turned out. And the very latest book is actually My Colorado. So that was just published in the fall, and it kind of talks about my life here in Colorado, what I have experienced, what I have seen, why am I even here, why is there a fountain of snow on the cover. Definitely a good read for a lot of people who just love skiing, mountains, or traveling by books. To be honest, that was one of the hardest books to write because that's about my life, and I find it so much easier to write fiction than to try to write nonfiction. Other reason why that book is very important is that me traveling abroad kind of all started with reading the first book in that series called My Alaska. And without that book, I probably wouldn't be where I am right now. So having the possibility to add in my own book to that same series was just really great. Okay, but those are all my books and kind of a quick backstory how they started. But what is always asked from the authors is where do they get their ideas? Like I've already mentioned a couple of times, my ideas have come from reading a newspaper, seeing a photo, doing a brainstorm of what book doesn't exist yet, but not necessarily every idea turns into a book. So here are just two photos where you can see very random titles of ideas that I have. Some of them have honestly just a title. Some of them have a couple of paragraphs. So I might maybe turn them into a book in the future, maybe not. It all depends. And then of course it's really nice to have a lot of ideas, and it's really nice to imagine what books could grow out of them. But unfortunately, someone also has to write them, and it's usually the writer themselves. That's honestly hard part, because the fear of the white paper is real. It can be extremely difficult to put an idea on paper, because in your brain it's so great, but then when you write it out, you will need to continue working on it, and it might mean just a lot of writing. So currently I'm working on the third book for the horse series, and I'm really struggling with it for various reasons. I'm still hopeful that in a month or two, I'll be able to be done with the third draft by now, and hopefully it's going to get published this year. At least that's my plan. What I have also found is that sometimes writing is a lot easier when you know how to manipulate yourself. For me, I work really, really great, and I write a lot better when I'm not at home, because at home it's you have all the stuff around you, and it's too easy to decide to go and clean instead of writing. So I love to write in cafes, in trains. Here is our co-writing, riding the train from Tallinn to Pärnu and back. We got a lot of writing done this day. You can basically write absolutely everywhere. You don't really need to have a table and a computer. You can also just have a pen and a paper, a little Bluetooth keyboard, whatever. As long as you're able to get some words down, that's kind of what you need. But yeah, I luckily know that it helps a lot if I can pretty much convince myself that I need to write. One of the ways how I do it is, you can see on this photo, you can see basically not a time turner, but it's an hourglass from Harry Potter. It belongs to Slughorn. It wasn't cheap, but after a couple of years of thinking, I finally bought it. And that's one of the best ways how I can convince myself that now is time to start writing, because otherwise the money I spent on that hourglass was just a waste. Other thing that really helps me to write is participating in NaNoWriMo. So this is a national novel writing month that was started more than 20 years ago in California, in US, and that has now basically grown all across the world. The goal of NaNoWriMo is very easy. The goal is to write 50,000 words in the month of November. That's it. You should start on the 1st of November with 0 words, and you should finish latest by the last of November with the 50,000 words. I've participated in it since 2013. I haven't done it in the year to 2021, but I also did it then. And I have been able to complete those 50,000 words every single time. So I'm quite excited and quite proud of it. And I'm incredibly happy I found it, because thanks to NaNoWriMo, I've also been able to connect with other writers in Estonia. Writing as a profession or as a hobby can be a little bit, you're alone, you're writing inside, you're not really doing much else. So it can be hard to find other people to interact with, to share your ideas, to just talk about writing. And NaNoWriMo has been a wonderful tool for that. We have done co-writing over the internet, where we just all sit at home and we all write, but we're still there to support each other. We have actually met up in real life, like that train photo a couple slides back. We have done nightly write-ins. I know Anneliina Raamatukogu hosts one every year that they can, where you can just go to the library for the night and you are writing all night long. And yes, getting to 50,000 words is a real challenge, but even if you don't get to 50,000 words, it's still, you might get to 10,000 or 30,000 or even 5,000, and that's better than what you had before. For me, you can also see it's been quite productive in which books have actually been published later on. So currently it's 5 books that I started during NaNoWriMo have ended up being published. Sometimes it does take a couple of turns or a couple of years to get that book just right. But usually rewriting a story, even if it means a lot of rewriting, it works out. I've also been quite lucky with getting some awards and honors and overall recognition for my books. 2 of my books, so Sorry But What, that one was chosen to be part of, I always miss it up, Estonian Children's Book Center, basically a catalog of young adult and children's books where they introduce them abroad to share to other people and other publishing houses what they think are worth translating from Estonian. With the book Sorry But What, and thanks to being in that catalog, I was also invited to participate in Hay Festival in Wales and take part of a panel over there. So it was a really unique experience to go there. And it was truly a moment where I started at this time in 2018, after having published several books, where I really started to call myself a writer. The other book that ended up in that same catalog just a bit was Heaven's Empty Bleachers. So both of those books were basically recommended that, hey, those should maybe get translated. It hasn't happened yet, but it might still happen. So already just being chosen to be part of there with my books was just great. A couple of my books have also been honored with a sticker and with the title of Great Young Adult Book. So here it's the same, the Heaven's Empty Bleachers and the Snowbird's Death. It always makes me so happy when I get any kind of recognition, because it can be hard to remind myself that, hey, I think I actually can write some good stuff. So hearing from people that they liked my books, or being honored with some kind of a title is always great. And at the same time, I do love constructive criticism. If someone doesn't like my books, I'm always interested to hear why. Yeah, if someone just tells me that, hey, your books were really crap, then it's like, okay, why you didn't like it. So just saying that you didn't like it isn't nearly as helpful as telling me that, hey, you had some really bad information there, your characters were flat and they all sounded the same. So any kind of a feedback I can use in the future to write better books is always very, very accepted and welcomed. But yeah, that was a rather quick overview of my books and my writing. Right now, like I said, I am working on my third book in the horse series that hopefully will be done soon. And while I'm also writing, I still keep on working here in Colorado on a mountain in a ski resort as a ski patroller. But what that exactly means and what that amazing job entails, that's definitely a story for another day. And if someone wants to get in touch with me, either to share your own story, tell me how much my books sucked or didn't suck, you are more than welcome to get in touch via Facebook, Instagram, my blog, or whatever else you can basically find. Okay, now it's time for questions.
Right. Well, thank you very much. This was all super interesting. And so we're still waiting for the questions in chat, but worry not. We have a lot of our own questions to you as well. One of the things I wanted to ask was, you say some of the books you've written because you find that it's missing in the Estonian young adult literature scene. And And I'm wondering, what in general do you think about the young adult literature scene in Estonian? Like, what is there too much of? What could there be more of? So what's your thoughts on the whole thing?
It's hard to say what we have too much of, because that might be just my very personal opinion because of what reader I am. And I do think that all of the books, they would find themselves a reader. What I definitely think we could have a lot more is overall books that have more, where the theme is a little bit more around different hobbies that you can do as a young adult, just because it adds a whole other perspective, and it can be a great way for people who haven't really found a book they want to read yet. If that book talks about also the hobby that they maybe might be doing, it's a great way how to start your journey into the reading world. Other stories I would absolutely love to read would be, because quite often, yeah, young adult books do have very hard topics and dark themes. I myself also like to write them. I would love to read where humor and kind of the fun and everything is more prominent, but it's extremely hard to write it. So that's probably the reason why they're really not out there. Hopefully, I'm still hoping maybe soon we're gonna have a young adult author who loves to write about humor, where you're just laughing your ass off when reading the book. But yeah, I'm not gonna be that because it sounds way too difficult, but I'm waiting for someone else to do that.
So are we. So whoever out there wishes to write funny stories about young adults, the market is open for you.
Definitely.
All right.
Yes, I also have some questions. First of all, yeah, you have told us about your books that you have published, but do you write any other type of texts?
I do a little bit of basically content creation for some customers. It's not some for blogs, some for home pages. So that's yeah, kind of the other texts that I write that are very far from my creative writing. I also used to write some poetry when I was younger. A lot of the poems that I wrote that I still like actually ended up in the book Snowbird's Death. And it was great to, instead of having to write them right now, I could just pick up some of my notebooks that I have still kept from middle school and just choose some poetry from there. Unfortunately, right now, I haven't written a single poem in years. I probably won't because I don't feel that my mind is there anymore. But yeah, overall, it's just my creative writing and then some work writing that's not nearly as exciting and nearly as fun, but unfortunately pays a lot better.
But speaking about writing, some authors, I find that they need to write, and some authors they write because they want to write. And which one are you? And what would happen if you didn't write?
I think I'm kind of in the middle there. I used to believe that, oh yeah, you can just wait until the inspiration hits you and then you can write. But the harsh reality is that if you're waiting for the inspiration to start to hit you, and that would be your cue to write, you might just be waiting and waiting and waiting. So now my mindset is that I will sit down, I will start to write, and then hopefully the inspiration shows up at some point. I still definitely, I feel the need to write because I love having the possibility of living different lives through just writing. And it's a great way how to share a lot of the thoughts and ideas I have. If I wouldn't be able to write, I think at some point I would just basically end up getting depressed and not too happy. And although, yeah, there are some times where I might go several months without putting a word on the paper because for whatever reasons, I'm still gonna come back to the pen and paper, or well, keyboard and laptop to continue writing some story that I have. Yeah, I've definitely learned over the years that I can't always wait for the inspiration to struck me and push me to write. And sometimes it's more of just powering through that really, really dry writing spell, get on writing. And then later on, if I realize I wrote something horrible and it's just bad, I can always delete it.
Yeah, we have also received a question on YouTube. Do you think you'd write a young adult novel set in Colorado?
I have actually thought about that because I really want to write a story where kind of the main theme is around snowboarding and skiing, and Colorado with its mountains and its amazing ski resorts is a great way where it could be happening. So probably it will happen. I will write it. I just don't know when, because I'm waiting right now a little bit for a better idea to come of how I could do it, because it has to have a story in there. So yeah, I'm just kind of figuring out what that story would be, where I could also incorporate skiing and snowboarding.
So that's another super exciting hobbies book that we can wait for. But is reading your hobby? Because some authors don't read as much, and that's like liberating. They don't get distracted by other authors' text. So do you read a lot, or rather not?
I love reading, and I definitely find it really, really useful for a couple of reasons. It is useful just because especially since I've been living abroad right now for such a long time. I went to New Zealand in 2016, and since then I've been basically between either New Zealand and US, or just in US. Reading, when I read in Estonian, is a great way how to not forget the language and all of that. That's easy to happen when you live in a different language environment. It is also a great way how to learn how to be a better writer and what kind of mistakes you want to avoid. One of the really, really big what I got from reading a book was that whatever I write in the book, I want it to be as truthful as possible. I remember reading a book where the main character was seriously injured, like internal bleeding, all of that. They're about to die, ambulance is on the way. And while their body basically bleeds out, they are having a lovely heart-to-heart talk with her mom. On the page, on the paper, it sounds really nice and really cute. In real life, unfortunately, I've also seen it myself. If you are that seriously injured, you are not holding a lovely conversation with anyone, because your body is dealing with the fact that it has to survive. So in some ways, it was a small mistake, but it annoyed me so much that even now, like 7 to 8 years later, I still remember it. And that's what I tried to do when I write myself. For example, when I wrote the lottery book, I don't know what happens when you win 30 million euros. What are you going to do with that lovely ticket that has that much worth now? So I actually ended up writing to the office of Estonian Lottery, and I asked from them what is the proper process after you win that much money. And they gave me the amazing list, what steps are done when you walk in and you're like, hey, I won that lottery. So in some ways, it was a very, very specific thing that I probably could have written however I want. No one would know the difference unless the people who actually won that money. But for me, it was quite important to keep it very realistic. And you can still make mistakes. In Snowbird's death, I forgot that one of the flowers on the very first page that I wrote, the main character is giving to the teacher in the fall, actually only blooms in the springtime. So that was a reminder that I need to check things. And overall, with reading, it's a great way how to realize what you like as an author, what you don't like as an author. And it's not necessarily bad if you find books that you deem not so good. It just kind of gives you the idea of what you want to try to be and what you want to avoid. And obviously, reading other people's books can give you ideas what you want to write. And they don't mean that you will just take someone's idea and write it out with your own words, but it might be that you read a book and you're like, they mentioned this thing, but I wonder if I could make it into a whole story. So yeah, definitely I'm that type of a writer who needs to read.
All right. Well, we are almost out of time. And so I will ask the last question, perhaps to some, the most important question of all. And that would be, which Harry Potter house are you in? Because I saw that, not Time Turner you said, but looked mighty lot like one. So what's your Harry Potter house?
I'm a very, very proud Slytherin.
And with that, thank you, Ene, so much for joining us. I hope everyone who joined us for this talk has enjoyed it. I did certainly, and learned a lot. So I hope to see you soon in Estonia. And to everyone who watched, thank you for watching.
Thank you.